Welcome back. The year was 1959 and the headlines came as a shock to us. Superman was dead. The actor George Reeves had apparently committed suicide. And the lethal weapon wasn't kryptonite. It was a speeding bullet.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's Superman. Yes, it's Superman.
For millions of kids growing up in the 1950s, Superman epitomized the ultimate hero. From 1951 through 1957, actor George Reeves faithfully donned leotards and cape to become the man who is faster than a speeding bullet.
You're just wasting your ammunition, Blinky.
Taken from the comic strip, Superman quickly became the hottest TV series of its time. Today it ranks behind I Love Lucy as the second longest running show in syndication. The role brought Reeves fame and fortune. He seemed to easily fit into the character. On his own, Reeves would make school and charity appearances to spread the gospel of Superman. Truth,
Justice, and the American way.
but it also typecast him so strongly that few studios would ever cast him in any other part. Except for his earlier small role in Gone with the Wind, his later film career consisted mainly of B-movies. In 1958, the show took a one-year hiatus after 104 episodes. It was due to go back into production in 1959, and Reeves was to make an additional 26 shows. He was 45 years old and engaged to marry Lenore Lemon, a New York party girl. But there was another woman on the scene, Tony Mannix, who was heartbroken by Reeves' marriage plans. Married to Eddie Mannix, a big studio executive at MGM, Reeves and Tony had been having an affair for years, with Eddie's blessings.
Tony Mannix was a very jealous woman, and the affair breaking up the way it did and involving another woman the way it did upset her enormously.
Then on June 16, 1959, it all ended. George Reeves shot himself. Unlike Superman, he proved a mere mortal. The police ruled his death suicide. Friends said he was depressed over work, but others insist it was murder. Who could have killed the Man of Steel? Was it the jilted Tony Mannix or her husband Eddie? Or could it have been Lenore? So was it foul play? We'll look at those suspects later. But first, some experts who claim it was indeed a suicide.
I believe in my heart and through the investigations I've conducted with people and weighing all the evidence that George Reeves did indeed kill himself.
Paul Mandel, a freelance writer and Superman expert, believes George Reeves was depressed enough about his own career to do himself in.
He was depressed, extremely depressed about it. He no longer looked like Superman. He had changed physically. He was 45 years old. The role of Superman did typecast him. He could not get any other work.
In addition, Mandel says Reeves was not entirely happy with his fiancée, Lenore Lemon.
She was kind of a wild party girl. And George was not happy about that. Lenore treated George very callously, and that depressed George to no end.
This is the official police version of Reeves' death on June 16, 1959. It's told in part by another Superman enthusiast, the author Chuck Harder.
George Reeves, Lenore Lemon, and a friend of theirs named Robert Condon were all in the house. They spent the evening drinking and hanging out. George apparently went to bed around midnight. Around 1, Mrs. Carol Van Ronkel and a gentleman named William Bliss showed up at the front door and wanted to come in and party. They came in and started being loud. It woke him up. He came downstairs and apparently was very upset at being woken up. He argued with William Bliss for a while, it's not known how long, and then had a drink with him and made up, and suddenly looked depressed and started going upstairs.
George Reeves was known to have a gun collection, but friends say it was used only to frighten intruders. According to the police, George opened his drawer and took out the Luger pistol. A shot rang out. William Bliss ran upstairs and found George dead with a bullet through his head. 40 minutes later, the police were finally called. The police wrote Reeves' death off as a suicide.
He was a larger-than-life figure, and I think because he was a larger-than-life figure, that's one of the problems that many people have believing that he committed suicide.
Toward the end of his life, George Reeves had lots of plans. A major publicity tour, the resumption of his series, his own production company. Not the kinds of things you would ordinarily associate with a man contemplating suicide. Indeed, one of the people who has the most trouble accepting the ruling of suicide is one of Reeves' best friends, we'll be speaking with him as the investigation continues.
They could have snuck in through the bedroom window.
Toni Mannix was a very jealous woman.
Lenore Lemon killed George Reeves. That is a fact.
There was immediate skepticism surrounding the death of George Reeves. His own mom, for example, hired a private investigator who reportedly found 2 extra bullet holes in his bedroom. And then there was this close friend who wouldn't buy the conclusion of suicide.
I was told that his death was suicide by self-inflicted gunshot wound, and I said I didn't believe it. And I went to the mortuary the next morning and saw the wound and saw my friend.
Art Weissman emphatically discounts suicide. He believes it could have been an accident.
He was not a believer in live ammunition in those guns in the house because there had been parties in the house before, and he didn't like the idea of anybody picking up a gun and saying bang. And so the fact that there was live ammunition in guns is a problem for me.
Weissman also believes Reeves' death could have been made to look like an accident.
An accidental shooting might have been somebody loading the guns without his knowledge.
However, powder burns were never found on Reeves, which shows that the gun was never held close to his head. That means someone else could have fired it. Weissman points the finger at Eddie Mannix, husband of the woman with whom Reeves was having an affair.
Eddie Mannix looked to me like a man who might have participated in some kind of an arrangement. Toni may very well have enlisted the help of her husband to resolve this situation.
Chuck Harder has other suspects in mind. He claims Reeves had big gambling debts that were owed to gangsters.
They could have been in the house. They could have snuck in through the bedroom window. Remember, George Reeves had pretty much an open house. There were a lot of people in there all the time, and friends of friends.
Harder criticized the police for their lackadaisical investigation.
They overlooked such facts as no fingerprints on the gun, additional bullet holes, a house full of drunken people, and still swore that it was suicide. To me, it appears that some sort of cover-up is going on.
There are some who go even further, saying they know who pulled the trigger.
Lenore Lemon killed George Reeves. That is a fact. And that is from information being compiled by people that were close to her at the time, people that had talked to her at the time. And within the next few months, we're hoping to get enough clearance so that we can start naming some names.
Jim Hambrick is convinced that George Reeves was murdered by his fiancée. Hambrick has a Superman museum in his home. He takes the museum on tour.
George had broken the news to Lenore about the fact that he didn't want to get married. He was in love with Toni Mannix, and that he was basically using her to get back to Toni. They'd argued through the course of the day, and later on that evening they'd had some guests over.
Hambrick's version is the same as the others, up to the point when George went to bed.
Lenore was very upset. George was in the shower. Lenore went upstairs after this. This was about 12:30 or so. She pulled out the Luger out of the side drawer where George kept it, and as he came out of the shower, he tried to wrestle the gun from her. He knocked her down on the floor, and she shot him. Before she went downstairs, she wiped the gun clean, threw it down. She picked up a couple of the casings, went downstairs, and told everybody that she was trying to talk George. George was shot himself. He committed suicide. She was arguing with him, trying to stop him. And she pretty much convinced everybody downstairs that that was what happened, in fact. It took them 45 minutes to call the police.
She left town immediately and went to New York, never testified or talked to the police, and just never came back to California. So it seemed to me like she was running and hiding.
The police never called her back because she had some very important ties with some people in Hollywood. Mickey Cohen, she had been out with Jimmy Hoffa. She was a socialite from New York. She had a lot of connections. My whole job now is to pursue that truth and to let it be known and to perhaps, hopefully, clear George's name of suicide once and for all.
What do you think happened? Get a pen and paper, because when we come back, I'll be asking you for your verdict on who shot Superman. I'd like you to grab a pencil and paper now, because in a moment I'll be giving you a number to call so you can register your vote in our mystery. Now that you've seen the different scenarios of the death of TV Superman, we really would like your opinion on how the Man of Steel died. Dial our special vote line. The number is 1-900-933-VOTE. If you agree with the police version that it was indeed a suicide, then press the number 1. If you believe that George Reeves was murdered, then you press the number 2. Once again, the number to call is 1-900-933-VOTE. And then you press 1 if you think it was a suicide, 2 if you think it was a murder. Each call will cost you 95 cents, and please, you must be at least 18 years old to vote. Now for what you believe is the true version of George Reeves' death. There seems to be very little doubt about what happened the night he died, at least according to our viewers who responded to the phone poll. A very tiny percentage, just 3.1%, believe the police version that George Reeves committed suicide. An overwhelming majority of those who called, 96.9%, felt that the actor was murdered that fateful night. So thanks for participating in our program. We'll do more of it in the future. That's it for now. I'm Geraldo Rivera.